Combine keyword research and keyword clusters with your internal linking strategy to increase your page relevancy. With Orit Mutznik, Director of SEO at DataCamp. Brought to you by Majestic, I'm David Bain, and this is SEO in 2022. Orit, what is your number one SEO tip for 2022?
Well, exactly what you just said, David. I want to combine keyword research, internal linking, keyword clusters. I think that's the top. Internal linking is essentially, in my book, the number one strategy. So you just have to be smarter about it in 2022.
Okay, so let's dive into it in a little bit more depth. So firstly, what are keyword clusters? And then how do you combine keyword research and keyword clusters?
So keyword clusters is essentially finding a full set of context onto one page. So that is a group of keywords, all very much similar, that you can actually target all in one page. There are tools that do that these days. For example, Keyword Insights, for example, that's a very good tool that I use to actually plug in a list of keywords that you will pull up from a tool, like, for example, SEMrush or Keyword Tool.io, another tool that I really like working with. And you plug in the list of keywords, you plug in their search volumes, and then you plug it into that tool. And the output that you get would be that this cluster would be the most efficient one to use on a specific page. So right now, this is the performance of every keyword in the cluster. And if you create a page that uses all of these cluster keywords together, then the likelihood is that there will be a boost on your page. However, that is quite complicated to do because you don't want to get too repetitive and have too much context on the page. So this is when internal linking comes in and can help you solve this problem. I think this is something that was very helpful to me when I was in e-commerce, and I'm looking into things to do that today in DataCamp, which is a different space. So essentially how you would go about this is you do your keyword research, you take a look at your search volumes that relate to the page that you want to create. And what you do then is you take the top searches that are relevant, and then you would turn those into your internal links. You would prioritize them to be your internal links. So you would create the content based on keyword clusters, the ones that you are able to use, but still making the page really accessible, natural looking, and readable. And everything else that you want to add on top of that will be a combination of the remaining of your keyword cluster and the top searched most relevant keywords in that cluster. So then you would have the copy written, and then you would have those internal links. So in an e-commerce site, for example, that will be a good idea to have a sort of a filter. That's the way I use it. For example, you have a page on dresses, for example. So you would be using context and clusters to create the text in the category page. It's an art because it's something that should be quite short. We don't want to push the products too much down, so we have to really prioritize the keywords that we use. And then comes internal linking. So that will complement and create the filters of what you want to use. So whatever you couldn't include in the text in that category page, you could include as links to discover more essentially from this point onwards. And the discover more links are strategically built based off that keyword research and those clusters that you couldn't include. And then you would go about and do that with each and every single page that you link to, and then you have a solid strategy that's very much relevant from a clustering perspective and from a search volume perspective.
Wonderful summary, thank you. And I like how you describe it as an art, because SEO, great SEO, is a mixture between art and science, isn't it? And the recipe is getting the mixture just right.
Exactly, because I think, we're a lot of us have seen Google evolve. People who are been in SEO for over a decade have seen, it's been the most interesting and most fascinating times in SEO to see how Google has evolved in basically ranking content and evaluating the quality of the content. So it used to be much easier, right? So right now it's not easy at all. So this is why it has to evolve into the level of art, because we still sort of have the same principles. We want to nail the context right. We want to rank at the end of the day. That's the goal. But also there's the aspect of people, of users, has become something that SEOs can't ignore anymore. I guess we used to be very much focused on Google and the search engine and how it processes the text, but we can't ignore that. Like, for example, I was frequently pitched by agencies who would tell me to have significantly more content on my category pages, because then that would help me rank higher. But I actually disagree with that, because I think that the purpose of the content in a category page has to be closely tied to intent. It's a transactional page. So the purpose of the user here is, to make a transaction. He was looking to buy something. So, but what would get that person to buy? Some context, because if they found my brand on Google, maybe they don't know it. So let me give you some. So there's a lot of connections, things that I take into account in writing content, is also branding and tone of voice and things like that maybe are not as regarded by other SEOs. So that's another aspect that I add into tailoring the content. So in addition to thinking about the most relevant pages for internal links and the keyword clusters that are most relevant, also think of the user and add that aspect as well. So who is the person? He wants to come in, he wants to buy the thing. So he needs the right context, and he needs to understand that the brand is trusted. So also EAT has to do with that. It's less important in e-commerce, I think, but I actually do think it's important, because no matter in which industry you are, you need to trust the page that you're going into. So you have context about the brand, you have context to tell you that you've arrived into the right place. And if not, there is very tightly connected contextual links that will get you surely to the place that you wanted to get to, even if you haven't. So kind of tailoring a one-stop shop.
So you say your category pages are transactional. Do you not want your transactional pages ever to be ranked?
No. I mean, for transactional queries, definitely. I'm just saying the copy doesn't have to be incredibly long to make the point.
Understood.
They're already transactional in intent. So just make sure that you complete that intent with your copy and include that with the keyword clusters and the internal links that are highly hyper relevant to what you're trying to convey.
So going back to your keyword clusters then, is there a certain maximum number of keywords that should be in a keyword cluster? Are we talking about 5, 10, 20 keywords, or is it impossible to put a number on it? Is it all contextual?
I think it's very much contextual. I wouldn't put a number on it, especially because it depends a lot on the type of space that you have. As I said, for example, in a transactional page, you don't have a lot of space. You don't want to get the products down. You don't want to get the information down the folds. So you still have to consider that. So as far as, however, when you have like long form content, so you can definitely go wild as much as it still makes sense and add as many keyword clusters as you can. But when you have short, a limited space to use the clusters. So, prioritize your clusters, use the ones that would make the most impact with the least amount of effort, I would say. You gotta really pick your keywords carefully when it comes, depending on the space that you have.
Okay, so say you've got several important keyword phrases that you want to rank for within your keyword cluster. So say you've got 5 to 10 keyword phrases that you really want to rank for, and it's impossible, obviously, to get all those keyword phrases in titles, headings, in your conventional areas for SEO. Is it then important to have separate pages targeting those keyword phrases, or is it still probably better from a UX perspective and also possibly from an SEO perspective to just incorporate those keyword phrases within minor headings and the content further on the page? And do you have just as big an opportunity to rank for those keyword phrases then?
So I think I would refer to this as developing process. So what I would do is I would try to go with the first version in which I would do the best that I can to actually include as many clusters as I can, again, with my limitation and just being aware of the fact that I haven't included 100% of the cluster. That's probably very difficult to do. So I will have that in the text. The internal links allow me to have more context without disrupting the flow of the context. If we display them as filters to the page, for example, or as breadcrumbs, for example. So that's kind of a way to insert more context to the page. Then I would go ahead with that as my first version and see how that page performs. And then, to continue boosting that page, I would also do exactly as you said. So include, find places to include more parts of the clusters in places like H1s, navigation, etc. If I hadn't done that already. And then the next stage would be to evaluate. I'm not 100% there on where I'd like to do what I'd like to do with the cluster. If the rest of the cluster is important to me enough, then I would go ahead and maybe divide that cluster into two and create a different page that I would link from my first page, and then the context will remain strong, and maybe think of what to do there that would perhaps be different. Also, intent is super important. I think, again, I'm not getting paid for this, but Keyword Insights actually gives you the cluster and the intent. And now that SEMrush has intent as well, so you have all these arsenal of tools and context. So once you get the context and the intent, then you have like all the pieces of the puzzle, and you can think about taking a different approach to perhaps the next page of the cluster. If, again, all these optimizations across the way didn't hit the mark, even though I actually do think that there is a big chance that they actually did, because Google, it's very clever in understanding that, you only have 10% of the cluster and rank you for the other 90%. If you do things right, and if the page, is good on the technical side as well, linked properly, all that stuff.
So you mentioned breadcrumbs as a good way to add internal links and increase page relevancy. What about other internal linking opportunities? What does the optimum internal link strategy look like in 2022?
So I think the ideal for me would be automation. So I think that's what I do when I look at the different pages that, inside Datacamp, for example. I'm going to find a way to look at the information architecture of the website and see how I can manage to connect everything together. So internal linking in 2022 for me is about defining or help define your information architecture in a way that Google would understand. So that's the main weapon of information architecture, internal linking. So I would look at a few things, like, for example, look at the structure of my website. Like, for example, Screaming Frog gives you a visual on your hierarchy. So look at that visual and see what needs to be improved, where pages don't get enough space, don't get enough links inside them, and then do your keyword research, and that would enable you to link to them in a contextually relevant way. So that's gonna help along with the clusters, and then so that's how you go ahead and build your architecture. And also another element of internal linking could also include a lot of automated modules on something in simple terms would be like people also like, or if you took this course, you might love all of the other courses. And if you find an automation to have in each course 5 other relevant courses, or for this product 5 other relevant products, so slowly you cover the entire website in internal linking. Of course, you got to have some rules in place so you don't repeat yourself in every single page to have the same internal linking, but there is a way to automate this if the data in the backend has the proper categories and the proper relationships that you plan on doing. So yeah, information architecture, see how you can reuse different modules and automate their appearance so you can suggest to your readers more relevant content in every place that you see. And breadcrumbs, as I mentioned, I'm a big believer in breadcrumbs because I've seen it happen. That's a great way to actually interconnect your entire website as a whole. So internal linking is something that is the trifecta of all the things that I just said. But internal linking kind of breadcrumbs seal the deal. Basically, you will never get lost in the website again. So I'm saying that to Google and to a person going in my website. So yeah, that would kind of hopefully seal the deal for 2022.
Lots of great tips there. And I just want to ask you so many follow-up questions, but we don't have time for that. So we'll have to try and get you on a future Majestic webinar if possible. But I just want to finish off by asking the question, if an SEO is struggling for time and they love what you're saying, they think, yep, I need to focus more on keyword clusters, I need to bring things together, add more context, add more page relevance to what I'm doing, but they're very busy and they don't have much time at the moment. So what's an SEO likely to be doing at the moment that they should probably stop doing in order to spend more time doing what you suggest?
Link building. That's I know might be controversial, but I've seen it happen. I was working without resource from a budget perspective, from an outreach perspective. So I was working only on internal linking and facilitating internal linking, and that brought a massive boost to the website without bothering with internal linking. I'm not saying it's important. I'm not saying it's not important. But what I do say is that if you can prioritize internal linking always, because no matter how many links you get inside that drive all that link juice, not a great term. So Google is still gonna not get your website fully if it's not interconnected properly. Google is not going to discover pages that you don't link to, and no matter how many links you drive into the site, that's not going to help. So I suggest work first on having a properly set up architecture with the help of internal linking. Put that in your priority first, and then go on to link building to seal the deal.
Great thoughts. You can find Orit Mutznik over at datacamp.com. Orit, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2022.
My pleasure. Thank you, David.
Check out the rest of the content from SEO in 2022 over at seoin2022.com.